participant-centered, patient-centered, consumer-centered. That means the participant is involved in assessment, they get decision assistance, they get free choice of providers, and so on. I didn't work all these out, I just gave some of them. Participant safeguards and protections around risk and safety planning and management of incidents. We have, right now, we're in a frenzy about disaster preparedness because we've had some bad disasters in the last 5 years, beginning with Hurricane Rita and Katrina both. And so now I think we've made disaster planning for the rare event will take precedence over trying to avoid some of these daily disasters and bad things that can happen. I'm going to move away from all this now. Those, I think, are on the slides you've got, and we seem to be getting some duplication. Okay, now, so at home, I was talking so far in the rather peculiar way I showed you the slides about some of the challenges of getting it together at home. How much credentialing do you need? Do you need credentialing to have someone drive people in their car? You know, we had Dad's helper drive his own car, drive Dad's car. But you get it, you know, as it gets to be a public program or an organized program, providers worry about liability and all these issues. And then getting the system together is really hard, and who's going to monitor it. And when I come in a second to new kinds of programs, I wanted to talk about some programs for that. But assisted living land is kind of a no man's land, and there's all sorts of different variations within states and across states. Somebody I admire called assisted living the killer application. They were referring to a computer term. When you get a new application and it throws everything in your computer off, and they said that assisted living, it kind of grew up without regulation at first, and consumer demand and provider imagination, and you ended up having assisted living. Didn't work with anything. Doctors didn't know how to behave with it. Are there nurses there that I can tell what to do? Are there, is this home care, but somebody's answering the phone at a main switchboard, so they think they can give some orders there, and then they get a disaster. And you know, nobody quite knew what to do with assisted living and who's supposed to do what and what the family had to do and who it was really supposed to serve. Providers initially had a model that it would be for the not quite ready for prime time users, the people who didn't yet need a nursing home. Of course, that's not what people had in mind. People didn't want to go anywhere until they needed to go somewhere, and then they wanted to go somewhere that was more livable, like an assisted living apartment. And so the population would tend to be more disabled than the provider was expecting, and it was very hard to coordinate the primary care. So there's a lot of problems with assisted living. Nursing homes, of course, are completely regulated environments, and so it's rather hard for a nursing home provider to use their own imagination and skills to do the evidence-based quality work that's expected. How many of you are mostly affiliated with nursing homes? Okay, and I was at a wonderful nursing home yesterday here in Billings, St. John's, and was very excited by what I saw. And I know that there's some very exciting things happening all over the country as well as in this state. CMS is coming up with a new rule soon for nursing homes to have quality assurance and performance improvement programs that are more dynamic, that are going to be mirroring I call them QAPI, the QAPI programs in other sectors like hospitals and dialysis centers and transplant centers and outpatient and so on. But those are all oriented towards a culture of safety. It's being drummed in. And of course we don't want nursing homes to be unsafe. And we want the procedures that are done there to be done properly. And yet there's a culture of rights, a culture of choice. There's the notion of consumer-centered care and even consumer-directed care. And getting all that together in the QAPI program is going to be hard. for nursing homes, and it's going to take all our imagination. But we know that there's new things happening. In the community, we're getting into programs for naturally occurring retirement communities, NORCs, and there's a lot of emphasis on making communities age-friendly. I think all the work in the disability world over the last 10 years under Real Choice System Change Grants, there's a little corner of CMS that monitors the efforts since the Supreme Court Olmstead decision that said you shouldn't have to be institutionalized to get your care met. That's a little area, but they've done a lot of work giving grants to states. I don't know if Montana has had some advantages under that, but they've gradually got a sort of a framework in people's mind that people can be in the community with disability, including Alzheimer's, that can be mainstream. Now, this little area of CMS is just a dwarf compared to the huge area that manages Medicare and Medicaid and nursing homes. So one problem in nursing homes is it's hard to maximize everything good that you want to maximize. So, but we do have this growing acceptability of people with high levels of disability in the community. We have the Beacon Hill groups starting in Boston and Beacon Hill, and then there's new examples of that where people living in the area just got together and they initiated a plan and formed an organization and they paid a fee, and then so then you get into, you need someone to change a light bulb, we'll get somebody through this program to do it. I was once at a meeting, an international meeting, and the question was raised where there was a lot of discussion about how the practical things people need most are the hardest to acquire. And the example of changing a light bulb. You don't want an old woman on a step stool if she's unstable doing it. But so somebody posed the question, how many geriatricians does it take to change a light bulb? And the answer they gave was one more than the country has, because nobody seemed to be able to figure out how to make that happen. And the Beacon Hill groups kind of do that, and at the same time they have a way to get to their to maximize Medicare services when they are eligible for it. It's like these are privately paying people. There's new models of assisted living that are consumer owned that are really kind of amazing. Bunch of people get together, they get some land, they build some condos or some small houses, they get an apartment for a caregiver. I mean, these things are covered in the New York Times, and they're pretty interesting. There's new models for dementia care. The best dementia care model I ever saw was in Adelaide, Australia. It was like SWAT teams. You had a nurse and a whole bunch of nurse assistants, and they knew in the corner of Adelaide, one quadrant of Adelaide was run, and the outlying rural area was run by this particular geriatric team, and they started this. They got to know all the people under their services who had dementia, who were living in the house, their own homes. They tried to be practical. They didn't insist that somebody can't live alone, or they have to move in with family, or family have to move in with them. They put a chart in the middle of the living room so people could write in it, family and SWAT team members. They tried to figure out what was practical, what needed to be done. If food has to be around and people have to eat at certain intervals, what do you do to make that happen? And they said that something like 90% of behavior problems disappear if there's no one there to be disturbed by them. Now, I thought that was an interesting comment. I thought about it a bit. Is that neglect or is that wisdom? A lot of the behavior problems disappear if there's no one there to be disturbed by them. And that it is true that people in their own environments can putter around. My mother did for hours and hours, and she wasn't trying to go anywhere, and she was okay until she got anxious about something. You had to sort of worry about whether something awful would happen, but I asked these people, well, what happens, What if somebody wanders out? Well, we find them. What if they got hit by a car? Well, it hasn't happened. I mean, it was fatalistic and practical, and people were living at home. And I came back really excited. This was about 10 years ago, and talked about it somewhere at NIH and NIMH, and somebody else said, well, this is exactly the kind of neglect that we invented nursing homes to overcome. So it is, but yet I think we're reinventing some of these ideas. There's the drop-in centers are replacing senior centers. It's a different kind of model, more like a coffee shop. We got people who are getting old now are used to something different than people who got old 20 years ago. Decision assistance seems to be built in. And are you all familiar with the Aging and Disability Resource Centers? There's one in every state now. And the idea is it's going to kind of one-stop information, good information about services. Of course, it's only as good as the services are. Then options counseling is a new term instead of case management, a very different approach to helping people decide what to do. The CILs are Centers for Independent Living. The Older Americans Act runs through area agencies on aging, but the CILs are also a network that has a different kind of philosophy, and the question is whether they can assist with older people. They teach people how to be employers. It's a whole different mentality. I see what I think I've come to a good place to sort of stop. I was going to say that there's a lot of interesting new things going on in nursing homes, and these are pictures of one of the greenhouses in Tupelo, Mississippi. This is a group that had formerly been in a dementia locked unit. So they're all sitting around a dining room table, and they're spending an hour and a half at the meal. So something can happen that you don't expect. Here's a lady going into the kitchen herself for her cup of coffee. Our regulations don't want that to happen. They would like her to have gloves and probably a face mask and a veil, though there is a sink where she can wash her hands there as she goes in. This guy, his thing was his bird. He didn't want a lot of opulence in his bedroom. A lot of people brought their own furniture and their double beds and so on. This is nursing homes, 10-person nursing homes. But he had his bird. He was entertaining the troops with his bird, and then he's bringing the bird home. That's his room, furnished rather spartanly, but you can see all his bird feed underneath. So, and these are two ladies who became best friends while they were living in this small house. When they were living in a big nursing home, a major nursing home from which the small house population was drawn, they didn't really know each other. A lot of people worry about the lack of social opportunities when you go into these small houses. And somebody asked the Miss Cynthia whether she knew, I forget her name, Miss Mary, they called them that in Mississippi. Did you know Miss Mary before you moved here? Well, I knew of her, she said. So this was this 96-year-old lady who made a great friend of this other lady. They did their own laundry and everything. So, I mean, there's great things happening in nursing homes, but there's still small little examples, and it's hard to keep them going. So I was going to finish by talking about some of the new roles for nurses, and I already talked about nurse delegation as something that can be done. There is the challenge of all these transitions that I mentioned before. This is my husband's view of what should happen. He's enamored of this idea that he calls clinical glide paths. That's a way to observe as many parameters of this patient, he's a doctor, so he says patient, this client, this consumer's condition, on a regular basis. And you sort of know what you expect, and you want to see if you've strayed too far from the expectations. The glide path metaphor comes from apparently the way they land jet planes, and you don't want to get too far out of the glide path. And so you have an expected course and an actual course, and if the actual course is above the expected, that's great. If it goes below, you've got to worry. And he's implemented this system so that unlicensed personnel in nursing homes can actually observe. And you